Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Rugby podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined by Liam O'Brien this week. Liam, I say we were recovering last week after the Toulouse Munster game, but how are you keeping anyway?
Yeah. Keeping going, man. Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to a cracking weekend of rugby ahead anyway, sure.
Absolutely. And I suppose, Liam, we can probably start off with it. Maybe we're a week and a half after that epic tussle between Munster Rugby and Toulouse. Maybe get your thoughts on that, leading into probably the Leinster Rugby Toulouse semi-final. Massively impressive performance of Leinster. Who would they face? La Rochelle and Roland O'Gara after La Rochelle defeated Racing 19-2. And then we'll look at the URC Round 18. Unbelievably, Liam. We're at the end of the regular season, so we'll have a look at the preview of those fixtures. An awful lot of fixtures with playoff ramifications. So we'll have a look at there, get our crystal balls out, and take from there. I suppose, Liam, let's start from the start. I suppose Munster Toulouse in the Aviva Stadium, what an atmosphere. What's your initial thoughts, reflections on the game that was?
In some respects, it was a season-defining performance, but it also put Munster back in the hearts and minds of their supporters, you know, because maybe there had been a bit of a disconnect there for a while, that we weren't playing any rugby at all, and the performances were quite poor for, let's build about it, until maybe the last month and a half or so, like, you know. And it's another one of those kind of stinging defeats that lives there, that's going to, you know, motivate, I think, Munster going forward. And also, you know, it will also kind of spur on the fans in a sense as well, you know. So I suppose when I look back at it, I mean, we've already heard from the likes of Rog, who was kind of a bit, you know, analytical about it, a bit critical about it. We've heard Matty Williams, who was maybe particularly harsh. But overall, like, incredibly proud of the performances. It was actually heroic. Like, it was, you know, considering even all the players that we were missing. And again, you're up against a full-strength Toulouse. We played brilliantly, didn't we? Like, overall, played brilliantly.
Yeah, the last episode, Liam, we asked for variation. We asked for Munster players to go out and express themselves, and to a man, they did that. I think, you know, we varied up the play very well. Our breakdown turnover rate was absolutely phenomenal on the day. Peter O'Mahony, heroic, led by example. Alex Cadellin, the young guys, Tom Ahern, Jenkins, Wycherley, Klein. You know, the scrum may have had issues at various points, but my God, Josh Wycherley for the opening try, what hands to hang on to that ball, retain it, and then present for the opening try. An awful lot of upside in that performance, Liam. And as he rightly said, if there was any doubt in terms of the hearts and minds between the supporters and the squad of players and management, the synergies were there, weren't they? In full effect in the Aviva for the whole 100 minutes and beyond. Thought the atmosphere was absolutely electric, and you know, Toulouse really did play their part as well. I thought it was a fantastic advert for European rugby.
Yeah, I mean, you'd never have heard that sort of noise at any other rugby game, to be honest with you. Any sort of international, any other sort of provincial game or any other club competition. So it was actually just phenomenal what support that we brought up to Dublin for the game. And, you know, we can't find any fault in terms of the opening half. Like, it really did quite so well up to, and then, you know, I mean, there we were 60 minutes, and, like, you know, we were like 24 points on the board. Like, it was crazy, you know, and we were 10 points up, and even, you know, all the way through extra time, Munster were at the pace of the game. You know, I suppose, you know, I have to say a bit unlucky in terms of both at kind of, you know, the end of the normal time in the 80 minutes, and then in extra time, you know, a few kind of unlucky kicks, because that's all it was. Like, it was just crazy unlucky, you know. And in terms of Ben Healy, like, we know he's a superb goal kicker anyway, but I think this is his kind of moment that Rog had against Northampton way back there in 2000. So yeah, he's going to kick on from there. There's no doubt about that. God, the thing is about the whole penalty kick thing. Yeah, they're World Rugby are now going to trial apparently this thing of kind of an attacker and a defender. I don't know how that's going to go, but for sheer suspense and thrill, I thought it was amazing. You know, the whole penalty kicking as well.
Yeah, and I think all credit to Toulouse. They were given an almighty scare from Munster Rugby, and no going into the game that made no bones that they expected a very tough challenge of Munster. But I suppose the ferocity, the physicality that they met on that day, I'd say even took them by surprise. But take nothing away from Toulouse, I thought the kicks in that sudden death was just ice cold, straight from the fridge. You know, starting with Dupont, Ramos, and Tamac as well. I mean, they were so clinically executed. So, I mean, I don't think there's any regrets. I wrote an article on Hawkeye Sidekick, no regrets on the Friday, and that's certainly coming out of the ground. You know, on Saturday, disappointed, but there was no regrets. I mean, Munster gave it everything. It was just, you know, as you say, the team will learn. The young guns will learn massively from the experience. And, you know, I'm expecting Ben Healy to go to the next level now. I mean, as you said, there's going to be plenty of motivation around the dressing room, around the training facilities in Limerick. After that, we want to get back to that level and we want to get over the line. So I think it all bodes very well. And I thought the brand of rugby that was played by Munster as well at different parts was, you know, pretty outstanding as well. You know, that expansive attacking width that we'd asked for. It came in plenty of space, particularly in the second and third quarter.
Yeah, and to be honest, we talk about Leinster, obviously, you know, and the higher playing that they're at, but we are also playing at a level that few teams in Europe could live with us, quite frankly, you know. And it's just that Toulouse were always able to answer. They had that real, the quality teams have in the championship minutes. They're able to get key scores and stick in the game, because other teams certainly wouldn't have been able to beat Munster at all on the day. So yeah, I mean, and again, we seem to have this thing like all good teams that we're now consistently playing to a very high standard week in, week out, and I don't think that's going to change between now and the end of the season. Which means we have a real opportunity of winning something between now and the end of the season as well.
Yeah, I think the momentum from the month and a half you captured it beautifully there to start the podcast here, Liam. That the form guide has been on an upward curve here. And just because of one result, I don't think that's going to derail things. I think the immediate reaction, I think, from players and management was, you know, they gave a good performance. Obviously, there's areas to improve, obviously. But, I mean, there's been kind of the unexpected week off last week. But again, they'll go hell for leather in the URC, particularly with the regular season finale this weekend and into the playoffs. And the hope expectation here, Liam, would be that Munster Rugby, the momentum they built, that can't be derailed now. I mean, we need to go deep into this URC playoffs and try to secure silverware. I think that's been the key objective of this group of players this season, particularly with Van Gran and Larkham leaving. I think it's got to be plenty of motivation there. And I think Van Gran's reaction in the final whistle to Toulouse, I thought, you know, captured an awful lot in terms of, you know, maybe some regrets there in terms of that Munster weren't getting to the next, you know, stage. I think he was quite emotional at full time, and I think kind of shows as well in terms of Van Gran. I know we've been critical in terms of how everything has been managed with Bath Rugby, but I think he can't really say the guy is not fully vested, 100% vested in the Munster programme at the moment, with that reaction coming off the pitch there Saturday week last.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I mean, he was in tears, like, you know. It obviously meant so much to him because he's coming towards the end and wants to win a bit of silverware, like, you know. And it's one of those things where you put it all out on the pitch, and there's literally not much more you could have done to win the game, and you lose by a penalty kick or two. But yeah, I mean, it's always been wondering, really, hasn't it? Really, is it just like Van Gran's a really poor coach, or are the players not good enough, or was he not able to get a clear sort of game plan together? And that the players are there. That's quite clear. So I wish him well in the URC and in trying to plot a Leinster defeat maybe in the final as well.
Absolutely, and I suppose we'll get to that later on, Liam, but I suppose immediate reaction, the game itself. I think Tom Ahern mentioned an out-of-body experience. I felt that definitely in extra time when the Cranberries came on. It just, I think, galvanised everyone in the stadium, and even there was Toulouse fans beside me were literally looking around, hair standing at the back of the neck. It was just a ferocious atmosphere. But again, we'll get to probably the Leinster preview in due course. I suppose then, fast forward the tape onto last weekend, Liam. Toulouse, again, seeking a third Irish provincial scalp. And I suppose the lead up to this was how much this would have taken out of Toulouse, given that performance that Munster had delivered. And to be fair to Leinster, I thought it was a marvellous performance from start to finish. And I would argue if even Toulouse were probably fully rested here, I think they would have struggled all ends up. What was your feelings on the game? 40-17 win for Leinster over Toulouse.
Oh yeah, I mean, Leinster were superb in all facets, and I agree. I think they would have won anyway against Toulouse if Toulouse had been rested, but it certainly wouldn't have been anyway as comprehensive. That's the way I feel. What amazes me about Leinster is they're doing stuff that really, honestly, other teams can do and can't possibly attain. And it's just the kind of they're always moving the point of attack, and no matter how good the defenses are, it's almost impossible to wonder where they're coming from next. So that's the simplest thing about it. All these different angles, and they're coming at you in waves and. I don't know, did I say this before, but it's kind of like they actually now play almost the most French of rugby. The interchanging of backs and forwards. And I suppose you could remember there with that outrageous pass there from Tig Furlong.
That was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I mean they are getting to that almost stage, you know what I mean? They're almost better than the French teams at the French game. That's kind of what stands out for me in general terms. That even though Toulouse, funny enough, got the first try, that they were immediately back, Leinster, and they answered quite quickly with a try of their own, and they were never really at that. I'd say probably when they got to their second try. I mean, honestly, Van der Flier is probably over at that stage. You know what I mean? Van der Flier was brilliant. But I thought Ringrose. I thought for me, Ringrose was unbelievable in that game. The way he ran, the way he was able to vary his game, his little dinky kicks over the top, as well, was incredible. And that partnership of himself and Henshaw is obviously key to almost opening up for the rest of the attack as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thought the centres really had a phenomenal game for Leinster, but I suppose start from the start. I mean, we heard at length from Leinster before this game about collisions being the key. I suppose reminded of that La Rochelle result in Europe last season where they got turned over from collisions. They were very conscious of that, but I thought from a pack perspective, I know there was maybe a few scrummaging issues here for Leinster that they need to address before the final, but to a man, the collisions were won by Leinster, and the concern I think for me for Toulouse was that the tackle count wasn't going to be getting too high too early. But I mean, from minute one here, Liam, Caelan Doris, some of the running lines were just phenomenal. He was breaking at a rate of knots, support lines all over the shop. Toulouse scramble defence superb, and it maybe set up the Dupont try to a certain extent, that the scramble defence was so good that Dupont basically sticks the leg out, gets a fortunate bounce. But Toulouse's tackle count was 174 for the 80 minutes. And given the 100 minutes against Munster, that ability of players to get up, support their colleagues again and again and again. And as you said, the focal point of attack. Ross Maloney, I thought Liam as well, had an absolutely outstanding game. All the talk's been about Johnny Sexton, and rightly so, and how he's orchestrated and play made everything. That all was good with Leinster. But I thought Ross Maloney, in terms of that link-up play, he had 11 passes during his cameo. I thought it was an outstanding performance of Maloney, and probably one that Andy Farrell and the Irish management team would have duly noted.
Yeah, he certainly was, and I mean, he's a very live option there in terms of second row, where arguably we could be a bit thin on the ground at the moment. I mean, I don't know how long that Ty Byrne is going to be out for, and kind of Henderson also seems to have an injury profile constantly as well. So yeah, he certainly is going to be one of those guys up there. Like Van der Fleer, of course, for me, like probably, and Doris, they're just incredible back rows, and I think that the ruck ball was probably, I don't know, it was like a second, 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds. It was like that's what you need to have to open up defences. And they had that all game as well, didn't they?
It was so well drilled, wasn't it? Just in terms of the clear out, not committing too many guys into the ruck. But again, for Gibson Park, the presentation of ball to Gibson Park to get that ball out, I thought it was just world class. And I felt so sorry for Toulouse three quarters. They had to make massive defensive reads from minute one. And even the players around them, making kind of a slight defensive read was being pounced upon completely. And you look at the stats of James Lowe, Hugo Keenan, and O'Brien. I mean, Lowe, 2 tries, 13 carries, 105 metres, and endless kicking metres as well on top of that. Hugo Keenan, full back, unerring, 1 try, 11 carries, 96 metres. O'Brien, 7 carries, 67 metres. I mean, really tells the tale of the tape there in terms of your quick book ball, that your back three can really hit, I suppose, 300 plus yards effortlessly there. And as well as that, we haven't even mentioned the Henshaw and Ringrose as well. They contributed, I think, for about 90 to 100 metres as well. So, I mean, you tally all that up, 606 metres, 134 carries, 31 defenders beaten. I think from a Leinster perspective, Toulouse were very much a beaten docket, I thought, at halftime, really, Liam, as you said. And to be fair to Leinster, they probably left points behind them in that second half particularly. But again, all scope for improvement that Lancaster, Cullen, Contatomi will be mentioning to the first team guys, particularly when we get to La Rochelle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said, probably that second half they did actually leave a good deal of points behind them. But I suppose really the thing is that Toulouse were a bit gassed out towards the end there. And look, I mean, you can't really fault a almost flawless performance really from Leinster. And if they play like that in the final, they're just going to blow La Rochelle away. The only way they're going to lose is to get into, and they're capable of doing, of course, La Rochelle. Maybe that's their grand game plan. An absolute dogfight, just a dogfight from minute one. That's the only way, to be honest, that any team really now is going to beat Leinster. But hugely impressive, yes, from the Blues, yeah. Exactly.
I suppose, Liam, any concerns for Leinster Rugby? I mean, Tyke Furlong, had his cameo, then was replaced pretty early in the game by Michael Alatoa, and I thought Alatoa, considering circumstances, acquitted himself well. But any concerns you see here from Leinster Rugby? I mean, we'll talk about La Rochelle now in a few minutes, but just in terms of a final in Marseille, any kind of underlying issues here for Leinster Rugby to maybe address heading into that showpiece?
Obviously, at this stage, when you're what 2 weeks out or whatever, it's going to be key to get Furlong into that team and into that scrum, because La Rochelle have definitely got a very big scrum there. I think that Leinster basically, they need to probably get a good few tries on the board early, and maybe kind of set the tempo in that sense, not have this kind of kicking penalties back and forth and that sort of thing that would play into La Rochelle's hands. So that's kind of what I'd be thinking on there.
Yeah, I think Marseille as well. The time of year down in Marseille and South France as well. If conditions are going to be hot, it's going to be very attritional in terms of squad impact and impact off the bench. As you say, maybe a fast start from Leinster might be required here to maybe get a 2-score game open early and see if La Rochelle maybe changed their game plan a little bit. I suppose the scrum as well is going to be probably an area of big focus, and maybe maul defence as well. Just considering La Rochelle being a very strong pack. But I think overall here, Liam, 1,004 metres from kicks gained during the 80 minutes for Leinster. And you saw the touch finders from James Lowe, Hugo Keenan, Johnny Sexton. The yardage they were getting on the ball, really, really good touch finders. I mean, that's going to be another kind of fascinating battle, I would think, when you have Brice Dulin and the back three there from La Rochelle as well. So it's going to be a fascinating final. I suppose we can get to La Rochelle, played at a very sparse lawns venue. I think the organisers really will need to have a rethink in terms of scheduling. Again, Racing 92 committed to a concert, very much like Munster Rugby, on the weekend. So the decision was to move this fixture 4 to 5 hours north to Lens. And to be fair, despite all the school kids coming out, it was a fairly poor atmosphere. But all credit to La Rochelle. I've kind of noted down here that La Rochelle stuck to the process, kept her composure while Racing 92 imploded. What were your thoughts, Liam, on that 2013 win for Ronan O'Gara's side?
That's it. Yeah, they just simply kept their composure more. I suppose the thing is, when you look at that game compared to the Leinster Toulouse game, it's like chalk and cheese, Yeah. And you would instantly say, they're just going to absolutely take them to the well, and they're going to blow them apart. But I think we have to remember La Rochelle beat Leinster last year, and I know that can happen in a year, but they have that game plan capable of doing it. And yeah, again, I'm quite impressed with the La Rochelle forwards, I have to say. While their half backs, I suppose Ihiwa West is quite a average at best out half, maybe, and kind of a weak point. Anyway, again, Aldrich is immense. Antonio in the scrum is immense as well. They've a really pack that I like the way that they played. Yeah,
and I think he was really sticking to the process there for O'Gara's game plan and the backroom staff's game plan. I suppose Racing 92, I mean, we talked about this in previous episodes here, Liam. They're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And again, they go 10-0 up here after a very shaky display from West early on the kicking tee. Let's be brutally frank about it. 2 from 6. 10-0 up, Fakatoa scores a great try. You think that is the platform for which Racing 92 would then create a bit of width. But as you say here, Liam, that La Rochelle pack, this was pure playoff pack orientated platform victory. I mean, Racing 92 really didn't have any answers to La Rochelle, particularly in the set piece. And I suppose Aldrich gets the try 10-8. Really kind of a dominant scrum. Aldrich and Pack crash over. Again, there's a few spurts here from Racing 92, but then you have Shat and Sa basically getting sin binned in 1 minute of each other. And even though it didn't really overly impact the game, I think the closing stages of it was probably a key turning point, because La Rochelle and the referee, they could sense anyway that Racing 92's pack were completely under pressure. And to be fair to La Rochelle, it was a very composed end to the game, being 15-13 up, and then spreading it out wide for West, who I think is a very dynamic ball carrier here, Liam. I think his place kicking has to really improve. It was exposed in the final last year against Toulouse, and maybe because La Rochelle's offloading game was so good prior to that. But I think for West, he's a very dynamic ball player, and maybe it'd be a bit of a ballsy call of Rod or something like that to maybe put in maybe a Brice Dulin or someone to that effect to change the kicking duties, because this final could be decided really on a place kick. And I mean, if West continues the averages that he's averaging, particularly in the semi-final, La Rochelle could be runners up again in this competition, which would be a bitter blow for the club and Ronan Garrett personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Dullin is actually quite a good goal kicker, as far as I know. That's something they might have to do from the very start, But it was a scrappy game, but at the same time, even with West poor kicking off the tee, they were still able to get over the line, And we have to remember he got the game's like deciding try, as well. So he does run well with the ball as well. But I'm sure O'Gara is thinking along the same lines as well.
Yeah, indeed. I suppose what of Racing 92 here, Liam? An awful lot of expectation on Racing 92 given their pool stages, performances, their comprehensive victory over Stade Francais, the local Parisian derby. And then Sale Sharks did give them a bit of a fright and maybe give a bit of a preview to La Rochelle and where to basically pick their battles on. But I suppose Racing 92, if you're looking at the draw, looking at the likes of Leinster, Toulouse, Munster, Leicester, teams of that ilk on one side of the draw, surely this is a massive opportunity lost for Racing 92 and their marquee playing group.
Oh yeah, I think every team has their time at the top, and Racing have had theirs, and I suppose, let's be honest, just like Clermont before them and Stade before them, they made a number of finals, and where are they now? They're absolutely nowhere. So I think that's the reality with Racing. They kind of focused almost on buying up an incredible backline and then not really much up front, and that was also kind of maybe part of the problem as well. And I suppose you'd have to say maybe some sort of kind of some of the talent was a bit flaky. As good as he is, Finn Russell, he's not going to be a European Cup winning out half as well. So yeah, I think it's a glorious opportunity that they missed. But I just felt anyway before the game that they have all the qualities of a winning team were in La Rochelle rather than in Racing. And to be honest, it does show you that no matter how much money you have, like almost like throwing money, like in football as well, we've seen this in the semi-finals this season, that it doesn't guarantee you anything. You just have to have that particular mentality, winning mentality in your players more than anything else, and they just don't have that.
Yeah, I thought that was probably one of the key points that you've made there. Playoffs, really, both playoffs were won in the trenches last weekend, particularly in the pack, the collisions, and particularly with La Rochelle really did take this Racing 92 pack apart. I suppose the fact that they ran for 30 metres in mauls, that was kind of a key stat right there. And it's probably one that Leinster Rugby have really noted in terms of the attacking maul from La Rochelle was such a weapon for them last weekend. Racing 92 again, repeatedly getting pinged for, indiscretions. And to be fair to La Rochelle, they can probably play two ways. The pack-orientated approach last year, they were maybe a little bit more cavalier in terms of their offloading game, particularly with West at 10. They've really kind of refined it back a little bit, really get Aldrich and the rest of his pack to really kind of be the focal point. But I suppose with Leinster, I think it's a very intriguingly poised final. Just given Marseille in France, I think the conditions will be extremely difficult for Leinster here, how they will manage that. But also, I think from a La Rochelle perspective, if Leinster go too expansive too early, I think La Rochelle quite capable of executing an offloading game, particularly with West at 10. So Leinster, Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster, I think it's going to be a fascinating watch, just given last season, what lessons have been learned from that La Rochelle loss. And the physicality, the collisions, again, it's going to be a fascinating matchup, particularly in that pack. And Tyke Furlong, as you say here, Liam, has to be back, because otherwise I think it could be advantage La Rochelle, particularly in that front five exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely crucial. And another thing I'm trying to figure out here is about Will Skelton. He hasn't been around. I know he's probably injured, but he would be absolutely colossal option even off the bench, a second row, come back row. So if he was available as well, that would really incredibly help La Rochelle. But yeah, I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a quite a tight affair, and I think Leinster are going to have the toughest game of the year. Well, as you probably would expect, in the final, the toughest opponents are going to meet all year.
And to be fair to Johnny Sexton, to be fair to Leo Cullen and Leinster management, to be very quick to kind of heap praise on La Rochelle and really earmarking that game as one of the toughest games of the season for Leinster Rugby. They know the experience firsthand from last season how La Rochelle, pack-wise, really did win the collisions, and I think that's probably a very big motivation factor for Leinster to get right in the final in a few weeks' time. But again, I think it's tantalisingly poised, really, just given the location. You're probably hearing the venue a bit here, but Marseille could be the mid to late 20s on a Saturday evening. Again, La Rochelle have experience of top 14 playing in playoff conditions like this, where you have to pick your moments to pick the intensity up for 10-15 minutes to really conserve energy and then literally go all out. Leinster won't be able to kind of go full 80 minutes here. They're going to have to pick moments here whether to expand, to be expansive or not. So I think from that experience, I think La Rochelle do have a bit of an advantage here. So I think it's all to play for Leinster to get really the matchups right and to really kind of execute their game plan at pivotal moments. And again, that bench is going to be absolutely massive. I think players will be coming off after 45 minutes of this final as well. And it's how good's your bench? You've mentioned Nick Skelton there, particularly. That would be a massive unit to come on to close out the game. And I think La Rochelle to a man coming on. I just thought the resiliency and determination of La Rochelle last weekend was key. West, if your 10 wasn't really doing it off the tee, they still continued to execute the process and the game plan. And I suppose that must be the most pleasing feature for Ronan O'Gara and his backroom staff, that La Rochelle really did keep their composure massively well, given that perspective. 10-0 down, West shanking kicks at goal. It was just, it looked like one of those days, but they refused to kind of let that kind of seep into their mentality. And I think we're very deserving winners, and congratulations. And no doubt Raj knows Leinster inside out. So I think that'll be quite a fascinating matchup. Liam, we might go to URC. Regular season is concluding this weekend, round 18, hard to believe. And if you were an organiser at the start of the season, given the league standings that we're really in at the moment, I think the organisers have to be very happy with themselves, just given how many open questions there are in terms of the playoffs. We already know that Leinster Rugby are advancing as top seeds, but after that, from 2 to 8, it is very much a toss-up in terms of a result here or a result there could literally fundamentally change the playoff picture. What are your kind of looking forward to this weekend, I suppose, Liam, in terms of these fixtures, and what's your general impressions? Do you suspect that there will be kind of a real surprise result here in this round 18 that will really fundamentally kind of change the playoff dynamics here?
What I'm hoping for is something that hasn't happened the entire season from round 1, which is the Welsh teams bloody well play some rugby and actually win some big games. Yeah. So we'll say with the Stormers going to Clonettley and the Bulls with the Ospreys. Again, in momentum, Munster have momentum, the South Africans have momentum, but surely to God, final game of the season at home in front of their big crowd, the Welsh teams have to perform. Surely they're capable of doing it. I mean, on their day, the likes of the Ospreys and Clonettley are capable of doing it, and that's really what I want to see, because that would go a long ways for the Irish teams to get the 1, 2, 3, which I expect could very well happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's look at the Welsh teams and who are they playing in the last round. I suppose Benetton Cardiff is on Friday night. I mean, probably a 50-50 call here. I mean, given two sides that are going to be creating expansive width, I think that's a 50-50 game. But as you say, Ospreys entertaining the Bulls in the Liberty Stadium. You also have the Dragons against the Lions, and also the Scarlets against the Stormers. So, I mean, no sense of motivation here from any of these home teams really to put on a performance, an end of season game. Players obviously departing these teams at the end of the season, so squad, team, management would want to send these players off in the right sentiment. The weather, dry tracks, Welsh teams really do love to play expansive rugby, so it'll be interesting just to see even Bulls, Ospreys. I mean, that's going to be a fascinating one because the Bulls could be one of these chief recipients. If results go for them, they could very easily be a top 3 seed. So, I mean, really, as you say, the league really requires these Welsh teams. And I think we'll probably get it here. And particularly the Scarlet Stormers. That looks like if the Scarlets really are on form, a really expensive side. Same with the Stormers as well. We've seen the potency of the Stormers in previous weeks, particularly in their South African homestand. That looks an outstanding fixture as well. So, but I suppose we can go to the Aviva Stadium again. It's been a common theme. I suppose Leinster probably going to be resting an awful lot of their frontline players against Munster on Saturday night. What are your general feelings there, Liam, in terms of that fixture? I mean, from a Leo Cullen perspective, it's probably a glorious opportunity to give players an opportunity to put the hand up for maybe match day squad selection for the La Rochelle final. So, I mean, Munster have to be very wary and have to deliver a good performance here to get over the line.
Yeah, it's a real banana skin, isn't it? Because let's be honest about it already. The two sets of supporters are probably saying that basically it's Munster's to lose, really. But what will not be lacking in motivation is the 5 or 6 departing Leinster players who are going to be playing, because you're going to have the last game ever for like the retiring Toner and Cronin, and then the lads who are moving on, Adam Byrne, Josh Murphy, Peter Dooley. So I mean, clearly they're not going to lack motivation in their final home game. Frawley is going to be there, dictating things for sure, and then possibly the O'Briens as well. So, and Sirocco, geez, yeah, it'd be interesting to see him as well. Yeah, and like we still also have our kind of injury problems. So we've Zebo now gone and Dan Lindy out, and I suppose Mahoney still recovering. Realistically, might not be there, make it as well. And the best we can hope for is probably Coombs off the bench sometime. So yeah, we're kind of depleted ourselves really, but like essentially get a win of any hue, and we're probably certainly the second seed. So that's huge motivation for a quarter-final and semi-final at home. And I think to be honest, I think we'll do it. I think we'll get the win. Yeah, and we're going to keep playing the way we are playing as well.
Yeah, I think the 2-week break should be significant for Munster to recharge. I know there's the injuries after the Toulouse game, but again, there's guys here to step in, to fill the breach, and even put their hand up for maybe playoff contention. So I'm not too worried about that score. I suppose from a Leinster's perspective, I know Tommy O'Brien is out. He had a knee injury in training last week, so he's out for the season, which is very unfortunate for the player because he was going great guns. But again, I think it's a bit of a banana skin fixture. The Aviva, Leo Cullen has mentioned post-game that 33,000 tickets have already been sold for that game, which is, for an end of season, round regular season game. I think it's a phenomenal kind of attendance, and I'd say that will increase as the weekend comes and the hype builds up here. But I think from a Munster perspective, it will be kind of fascinating to watch just to see, has the form continued in terms of their variation, in terms of their skill set and the execution. Hopefully they've learned bits and pieces from that Toulouse performance that they can take onto the park against Leinster. But Leinster are going to be very competitive. This is not going to be handed to a plate for Munster. And really, to be fair to Munster, if they don't really get things right early, keep this Leinster team in the mix, this could be a very difficult evening's work for Munster, really. So I think 9 and 10 really have to dictate things if a good bit here for Munster early doors to get that foothold in the game.
Yeah, I mean, the thing we can guarantee about Leinster is, even if it's their so-called reserves, they're going to play the exact same game that frontline players play, in the exact same way, at the exact same pace, quite frankly, because they can do that at the exact same pace. So we have to be able for that. But like, you'd have to say, like, in the back row, if we have Kendall in there, and if we have a Jack O'Donoghue, I mean, I think they can definitely better them there. It'd be very interesting, of course, in the scrums as well, to see how we go against, it has to be said, like if it's going to be like the likes of Cronin and Healy, or Ed Byrne, Dooley, still very, very powerful props there. Good scrummage, all good scrummagers as well. And of course Scott Penny as well. But for me, the thing is, what are we going to do at half back? Like we still have tactically to think about who we're going to be starting at about 9 and 10, and also even in terms of the second row. I mean, surely Tom Ahern has put his hand up for an actual start. I mean, I'd love to see him starting actually in the second row. And in terms of, I suppose in the backs, I hope to see Andrew Conway back at this stage. I think he's kind of nailed on. So it's looking very good for guys to really put their hands up for the run-in games as well.
Yeah, completely agree with Liam. And I mean, Tom Ahern probably mentioned it in his press conference today. Just in terms of the easy access that Leinster got, particularly in that Thomond Park fixture a few weeks ago. Again, that can't really happen here. Again, so I think lessons must be learned. It would be very ironic, but is this the opportunity for Jason Jenkins to get a start? Made to see Leinster see what they're going to be getting next season. Because certainly his work rate, Liam, against Toulouse was nothing short of phenomenal. The 2 turnovers, 9 tackles. He was, all action. I think Leinster will be probably very keen to see some action for Jason Jenkins anyway. So I think a Jenkins Hearn might be a good kind of combination there. As you say, I think we have to kind of front up, particularly, in our pack, see if we can get this game kind of done, put to bed maybe in 50 minutes. It's going to be not easy. But I think from a Munster perspective, it's really kind of getting this game nailed down early. I suppose you have to kind of go probably with a Murray, KC, kind of Carberry tandem there. And then after that, you're probably having a Farrell, Delende not being there. So maybe it's probably Scannell, potentially. I suppose fullback comes into Mike Haley as a doubt as well, given his kind of withdrawal from the Toulouse match. So again, you're looking at maybe kind of a Shane Daly, Matt Gallagher, as you say, and Andrew Conway maybe going back in there as well. So obviously Keith Earls will be playing back 3 here as well. So I mean, you don't want to kind of change things too much, particularly in that back line, because there's an awful lot of cohesion in the last few weeks. But yeah, Munster can approach this in the right manner and really kind of get the tempo and rhythm in their play. Then, really ask a few questions of Leinster, particularly down the stretch. I think we should be winning the game. But again, this is by no means a foregone conclusion. And I think Leinster, Leo Cullen, Felipe Conthomi, and particularly Stuart Lancaster may have a few tough decisions to make, particularly in that match day final squad for La Rochelle in the Heineken Champions Cup, because guys may be bouncing off the ground here to get on a plane to Marseille. I suppose, Liam, we can maybe get a few predictions from you in terms of these round 18 games, because an awful lot have playoff ramifications. So I suppose probably the first one, probably not. Benetton Rugby against Cardiff Blues. Who do you fancy in that one?
Benetton and Cardiff Blues. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's funny if I'd actually probably would go with Benetton. I just have a feeling, that it's been a bit of a write-off of a season if we look at it like for Cardiff. And Benetton, they actually play some beautiful rugby at times. They don't sustain it, I suppose, for 80 minutes. They probably are kind of a 40-minute team. That's probably been their problem all season. But I take Benetton to nick it, to get the 3 points against Cardiff.
Yeah. Ulster Sharks?
No, that's the first game I'll be watching. Yeah, for sure. Ulster Sharks. I just fancy Ulster against the Sharks. I kind of have a feeling that the Sharks are not a team. They're like a kind of a team of individuals rather than otherwise. They will click at some point, like really click, which is scary. But I think Ulster have all the motivation here they need to basically win and guarantee themselves top 4. Anyway, top 4 spot. So Ulster by 7 points, I reckon.
I think this could be one. Yeah, I think Ulster, but I think Sharks, pack-wise, their physicality is going to ask Ulster an awful lot of questions. And Vermeulen, I'd say, is going to have to be on top form again to really, contend with that Sharks physicality, because it's going to come. They're going to have periods of pressure here from Ulster Rugby, but I suppose just given Doak, given Balocon, given Lowry, given the fast ground here, home field advantage here as well, a good crowd going to be a Kingspan as well. It would be a rather horrible shame for Ulster Rugby if they were now to literally lose this game and then get into on the road for the playoffs. So I'm going to hesitantly give that to Ulster, because I think Sharks are going to provide a bit of a stern test here for Ulster. Ospreys v Bulls.
Yeah, wow. This is going again another cracking game actually. Yeah. I saw the last game. Say the Ospreys were playing against the Dragons, and it was just like total barbarians rugby by the Dragons. But funny enough, it was brutish rugby by forward tries from the Ospreys. Okay, Ospreys and Bulls. I would have to just still say the Bulls. The Bulls just bring a sort of a power game. Like in a way the Sharks, that is very difficult to contend with. So I go Bulls plus 6 points.
Yeah. I'm not sure for me, because Ospreys have shown at various points of the season that they can be competitive. I'm just thinking back to November, Liam, when Munster Rugby went to Ospreys, and Ospreys did a job on Munster, particularly from a back row and a front five perspective. And I think that could be a fascinating clash between the Ospreys and Bulls, particularly in the pack exchanges. I'm going to hesitantly bet here on Ospreys maybe pulling. I think there's a shock result here in terms of playoffs, and I think this may be one where nobody's really expecting the Ospreys to really make much. But I think Ospreys under Toby Booth have made steady progress. There's been ups and downs, yes, but once they kind of get it right, Stephen Myler there at 10 kicking field goals, I think there's a case in point here. I think Ospreys maybe finish the season off well, and maybe pip Bulls here late on, maybe a 2-3 point win. Leinster, Munster, get your viewpoint there, Liam.
Yeah, Leinster, Munster. Yeah, I think going on the home stretch, we'll have quite a bit. When I say that in the last 15 minutes, I think we'll have a bit of a lead ahead of them. So I'm going to go with Munster by 10 points in the end.
Yeah, I think all the motivation here is from Munster Rugby really to secure the home field advantage. Otherwise, it's either Kingspan or South African trip. It's either that or Thomond Park, really, to be fair. And I think players will be motivated to stay within their province, the quick turnaround of the playoffs. So I think from that perspective, I think Munster Rugby. But again, I think take nothing away from Leinster Rugby here. I think this will be a strong challenge. And I think from a Munster Rugby perspective, they have to be on top form. If not, then this result is maybe a 50-50 call. But I think Munster maybe by 7 to 10 for sure. The Glasgow Edinburgh game in Edinburgh here, Liam. I suppose it's the fight for 7 and 8 spots in the playoffs. Who are you fancying there?
Let's be honest with you, Edinburgh should definitely have beaten when they actually woke up from their slumber against Ulster, and they have been way more impressive this season, I think, overall than Glasgow. Glasgow, they were the worst of all teams that travelled to South Africa. They were just absolutely on their feet. And I don't see any way back for them now. So I would say Edinburgh, I'd give them 8 points.
I would probably agree with you there. I think Glasgow's been an up and down season, particularly that the Challenge Cup as well. There's a good campaign there, but obviously fell short. But again, I think from an Edinburgh perspective, I think there needs to be a little bit of an upturn in form here. The home form was the fortress. But again, that's weighing with the Ulster Rugby. The Wasps game, I think, was controversial enough in the Challenge Cup, how they lost that. I think Edinburgh, for me, they are vulnerable, and same as Glasgow in the playoffs. I think Edinburgh will edge this, still take the local bragging rights, but I think they'll go no further, either of these sides. Dragons Lions, I suppose nothing really to play for here, but who are we thinking?
Again, it's going to be totally barbarians rugby, headless chicken sort of stuff. Like, it's going to end up something like 44-37 or something like that. Yeah. And yeah, I'm actually going to go with the Dragons to get over the line actually in this game. Yeah, I think that they can do it.
Yeah, I think they need another home win at least anyway to boost maybe a little bit of confidence. I think how the confidence has been in Dragons here, it's been shaken to the core given their home stand not winning a game until very recent. So I think, maybe Dragons, but again, it depends on the lines, in terms of their mindset. Again, they've nothing really to play for, but I think that'll be a very high scoring game. We'll edge it to the Dragons. And then Connacht Zebri, I mean, there's been an awful lot of talk here in Galway, just in terms of the squad selection for Andy Friend here, in terms of does he give cameos for likes of Ultan Delan, guys that are leaving the club, or does he look ahead to give maybe some good academy players game time against a Zebri team that have really struggled this season? Who do you feel, Liam, may be victorious here in Connacht on Saturday night?
Oh yeah, Connacht for sure, But of course, the way their best to do that is starting. Yeah, for sure, starting it should be the academy guys and the guys who are going to be around next season, and then obviously cameos off the bench for the likes of Delan and the other players who are leaving. That seems to be the fairest way about it.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a few injuries coming into that Connacht game, particularly Bundy Akai, Mac Hansen as well, Delahunt. There's a few kind of marquee guys that are out injured for this fixture, but I suppose I would go with you. Maybe look for your academy, look for the guys who are going to be here for pre-season moving forward. So I think Connacht should win this game relatively easy. But again, it'll be an emotional night given the number of players that are departing the scene for Connacht, particularly like Ultan Delan, that has kind of served the province so well for so many years as he goes to France. And finally, the Scarlets versus the Stormers. And I mean, I think this is another key game here that may be a 50-50 call. Would it be, Liam?
Yeah, for me, that would be actually the upset of the weekend, actually, yeah. And I'm basing it on the fact that the Stormers were not that impressive against Leinster in the last time out, and that definitely they're certainly well beatable. It's also going to be interesting to see. I suppose it's their first time really, just that I can think of the Stormers being in Europe since they started off against Munster back in September. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's the first time I can really honestly remember the Stormers playing in Europe, apart from maybe they might have played with the Italian sides, a few weeks ago at the Benettons. But yeah, so
I think there may have been the trip to Italy, but
apart from that, it's the first time since Munster. So I think Clonettley well capable of causing the upset. I'd actually be tipping them by about 5 or 6 points.
Yeah, I think this is another 50-50 game that, again, when you're looking at the results, this could be one that maybe springs to mind. Again, I think Scarlets have been too up and down for me to really kind of put my hat on them. I think it's the Stormers for me. I think massive motivation there to be maybe a top 2 seed, given how things may go on the Aviva. So I will go for the Stormers, but again, not be at all surprised if one or two of the South African teams come a cropper, particularly in Wales. And I suppose predictions-wise here, my predictions here for, you can laugh at me next week, 1 seeds Leinster, Munster 2, Stormers 3, Ulster 4, Bulls 5, Sharks 6, Edinburgh 7 and Glasgow 8. I think
that's exactly the same I would go with. Yeah, exactly the same. Yeah.
But as we all know, there'll be a result here that'll basically be a grenade in the middle of it, and then, it'll be very interesting, that a team that you don't expect to be travelling South Africa may have to travel to South Africa and vice versa. So all to play for. Liam, we may leave it there. Thanks very much for your time, and look, we'll review the URC Round 18 action and look at the playoff picture there. Maybe a few tasty playoff games there for sure. But many thanks for your time, Liam. Thank you.
That's great, Mark. Thanks. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.